My name's Hugh Harker, or Houston Harker. Like Mindy said, I'm a community organizer. I have background in urban planning and design, as well as applied data and technology and applied research. Focus on civic technology specifically. As Nandini was saying, I organize Code for PDX here in Portland. Basically what we do is community-built civic technology. So we work with local municipalities and nonprofits to develop applications for their specific concerns. If you want to look at some of our projects, I recommend checking out recordsponge.com or Oregon Record Sponge. That's a project we did with the Public Defender's Office, where we automate, we take a lot of the headache out of having somebody, your record, qualified convictions removed from your records. Right now we're working with a bunch of nonprofits on a really great project called Pass, which is developing a personal data wallet debate where you can keep your personal documents that you own in a very secure place. We're actually working with nonprofits engaging with the homeless community, as document maintenance is a very difficult challenge for that population. Really great project. We'll be meeting here later tonight. It's a group of, anybody who wants to be involved in this application development. Totally welcome. We're open to everybody, no matter what your skill level is, but we do try to help you get along, get some work on a big project if you haven't had that yet, especially as a CS student, where you're generally working on your own stuff, or your group projects are pretty small. This will be a bit your first exposure to the messy, big collaborative workflow, which is actually what I'm here to discuss, is how we organize these projects. So we'll kind of go over Git. It was built in 2005 by resident genius and curmudgeon here in Portland, Linus Torvald, as part of the Linux project that he runs. If you guys are familiar at all with the Linux platform, everything you have that you don't look at probably runs on it. Most of the internet does. It's great. I used it for years, and I have some friends who feel very betrayed that I eventually went to the Mac platform. So it's a thing. But basically, it's a version control system. So you have this project you're working on, and typically you would check out a bit of it from the project, work on that, and then send it back to the main repo, which is stored somewhere online. That was the traditional way of doing things. Git kind of innovated on that and took a distributed concept where you check out a whole branch, the whole copy of the program, and it records the changes to every individual file in changes of state of those files as a history. So you have a copy of it, it's just as good as the copy on the server. You aren't working on a little bit of piece of it, you're working on the whole thing. A really, cool way to do things. In my opinion, it's been very successful. Not every software company uses it, but most do. But it provides like a nice a repository for a project, and you can actually track the changes over time. And you can go back and see how things change, and more importantly, who changed them, and for what reason. We call that Git blaming. It's a little bit of antisocial thing that comes with software development, but Git is terminology borrowed from the Queen's English to mean idiot. So that was the joke. 2005 was a different time, y'all. So it's essential, this is a tool that's used widely for software development. You'll run into this if you are at all in the tech space, but I think it also can be used for projects outside of software development, because having a history and a common place to collect all the information for a project that can record changes over time is pretty useful. And as I'll show you, it gets, most of the projects I worked on before I really got involved in software, we just had a spreadsheet we all shared that was in various states at various times, and it was all messy. And like working on this, and especially with the projects platform, makes it so much easier. It makes life a lot easier. And like I said, I'm not going to be covering specifically how to use Git here because we'd be here for a couple weeks. We can kind of briefly go over, we'll go over the terminology and stuff like that, but if you want to learn how to use Git, a lot of great courses online to get you up and started in 10 minutes. To learn the more complicated processes takes a little longer. All right, so, we had this thing called Git, and, it was stored in this place called GitHub, and we could put our repositories there. And what we noticed was we often had to have another thing, a Trello board or a Kanban board somewhere where, we could, or, a Google Docs spreadsheet where we could actually organize the project, set up our sprints or organize our tasks. It was really messy, really difficult to get people to know what they had to do, what an issue, what issue anybody was working on. You'd have multiple people working on the same thing at once. It would get really messy really quickly. So when GitHub Projects launched, we took a serious look at it and realized how easy this would be to integrate into our process. It's a great way to take a look at a repo online, connect with it, bring other people into the project. Allows you to, like I've been saying before, allows you to track all the work that's been done. It allows you to say what work needs to be done. As your project moves along, as the needs change. It really is great for this iterative design that works best for software development. However, if you want to use a more waterfall-based, with a more, I did a lot of civil engineering projects, so it's hard waterfall all the way down, where you have a Gantt chart and you stick to it as close as you possibly can. So you can do that too. And also, because you are pulling together a community of people who are usually volunteering their time, having the fact that it's asynchronous, you don't all need to be working on it at once. You all can meet at various times. You all can connect at various times. We have people from around the world who work on our projects. Sometimes we have people check in from Japan, where it's literally the next day for them. So it's really great at providing a place where you can have that kind of asynchronous development happen. And the really cool thing is if you want to experiment with any project, any project that you have that can be branched from, or you could copy the repo for, you can take it down and mess with it, and you don't actually have to commit those changes back, but you can fork it over to your own. That's some terminology here. You can make a copy of it in your own project folder, and play with it all you want. Really common way we see software develop is someone will have a great idea. Someone's like, oh hey, I like that great idea, but I need it for this different thing. They'll go copy it, modify it. Now it's this whole separate thing that they do. And sometimes if the license permits, they're like, hey, I like this great thing. I'd like to build this thing for it and then sell it for a ridiculous amount of money. That also happens. So it's just it's a great platform for that kind of thing, and that kind of collaboration. All right, so just to kind of briefly go over what we do is, so community-based project management. So really what we want to talk about is the type of projects we do with Code for PDX is we're not funded in the traditional way. These are projects people work on in their spare time to contribute to a community, to build, their personal skills, to try new software platform, to do all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of reasons you can come to open source community-built development, but we want to keep, because they're usually, funded in non-traditional ways, they don't have the type of push behind them that a proper software product does have that you guys will probably run into in your lives. You kind of need to have the flexibility to have a volunteerist attitude. So what a volunteerist, an ability for volunteers to come in and contribute to the project, but also they might not. They might say they want to contribute to the project, then leave. Maintain a flexible stance so you can keep the project moving forward, but understanding that you need to be flexible because people are volunteering their time. So yeah, that's the fundamental outlay of it. Okay, so I kind of want to cover just some terminology here in case you aren't familiar with it. Make sure we're all speaking the same language, because tech, it's got its own vocabulary. Let's just go with, start with the repo or repository. This is the place where the project lives. When you clone a project, you pull your project down, you make a copy of everything involved in the specific branch of that project, usually the main branch. That's where you're going to be doing your work from. The way a project is organized is you'll have a center branch, and all the changes will come off of that branch, and then they'll merge back in. So that, like the single, you'll have one source of truth, which is really great. You can always update that if you have an old repo on your computer and you haven't worked on a project in a while, but other people have been working on it. Really nice thing is you can just pull it down the latest version, it'll update, it'll tell you everything that's changed. And you can actually go through and kind of track the changes to every file that has occurred. So that's the functionality with a repository. The important thing is, like, that's going to be the main thing, like where everything lives. So issues. So when you want to change a repository and you're working on a project, you create an issue. And an issue represents, they're specifically scoped to what you want to resolve. You always want to connect to design documentation if you're writing an issue, if it's available. Specific, like, hey, we want to add this feature, it's on page here. Or we have a bug, it's involving this feature right here. Or, I want you to write a new chapter, it's on this page here. And really nice thing with GitHub projects is you can set up templates, which really make your issues very clear and concise. It also creates a sense of ownership for your volunteers, that they take on an issue. So when people come to the meeting and they want to contribute to a project, you can actually assign them an issue, and they can see it on their account. They see that they owned it. If they go to an interview later and they need to show examples of their work, be like, hey, pull down this issue on this project here. Here's the work. Here's the So you've got your code. You've got your issue that you want to change. You need to create a version of that code where you're actually working to make the changes. So we always set it up on our projects that we have two principal branches, main and development, and then the actual branches to resolve the issues are branched off of development. What the branches do is it basically allows you to make the changes and then you to submit them back to the main repo through a pull request, which I'll cover in just a minute, to resolve the issue. The methodology we use for branches is when you check one out, or when you build a branch on your own project to correct an issue, you name it the issue you want to correct, as well as the title. That's just good practice. So, like, hey, I'm addressing issue 111. We're adding, a space after this word. Or, hey, we're writing a new feature. Branches should be named specifically after the issue they're addressing. And yeah, part of the Git process is you check out a branch, do your work, submit it back up, and it gets merged into the thing if everything checks out. All right, and finally, we have pull requests. So you've got a project, you've got an issue you're working on, you've made a branch named after the issue, then you've done the work, and now you need to send it back up to the main repository, back to the project, to get merged in if everything works out okay. And the great thing here is you have multiple people doing this at the same time. So that main project is changing down the stream. So you might be working on something and it conflicts with other issues that have come up. And so what you want to do is before you just merge everything back in, you have your, whoever's contributing to submit a pull request. where they propose their changes. GitHub, well enough, identifies any sort of issues that might arise with that code, whether it's like you have conflicting lines, or it failed your testing suite, which you can set up, or any other issues that might resolve with other changes that have happened since you forked your repository, since you forked your branch. So it allows for this conflict resolution, which is really great, where you can actually see the changes, and if you have multiple people working on the same thing, you can actually have a place to work everything out, test that code, make sure it runs correctly, and then finally merge it back in. So it's like this great asynchronous error catching system that really works well when you're working with a bunch of people who are, you could be working professionally, but are really just working on stuff in their spare time. So you have a way to make sure that everything keeps working on your main branch. So it's really useful in that way. All right, so just to kind of pull everything all together, so we're all speaking the same language, and I hope I didn't bore you all to death with the terminology. So a repo contains a project. Projects, the way you advance a project is you create an issue, or a task, if you want to. It probably makes sense to call it a task, really. But the issues are assigned to specific users who, or contributors, I should say, who resolve the issue, push it back up in a pull request. The pull request is reviewed against the current state of the repository. If everything checks out, it works correctly, it's merged in and becomes part of the living repository. And all this happens over and over again. All right, so we're gonna get out of this for a second and kind of just go over what projects look like. So here's a repo. There's no code in it whatsoever. This is strictly text file stuff. So when you create a project, it'll be empty. You can, GitHub will give you a URL to push things into if you need to. Like say I've been working on a bit of code and I just forgot to initialize the directory when I started out, and now, I probably should have been doing commits 10 days ago. That happens if you are doing code, if you are doing any other project, like, hey, I've got this text file I've been working on for such and such. You can definitely just open up a project on GitHub by creating a new project. You just go to your main page. Yeah, new repository up here. All right, so you just go to new, you name it whatever you want to name it, decide what you want to add a README. I typically, always suggest adding a README. If it is like a project that you are planning to work on with the community, definitely make sure you research which license you want to use. We use either Creative Commons or the MIT license for all our projects. There are various gives and takes with each type of licensing. With community-built software, though, when it's open source and stuff like that, I do recommend the MIT license just because it gives the broadest amount of permission. So if someone wants to take it and run with it, turn it into their own private thing, they're more than welcome to do that. If you are looking for something that is not profit-motivated, Creative Commons is also a good licensing framework to use, but obviously, however you want to organize legally, that's up to you. So yeah, you just create a repository like that. And let's just say you want to edit a file. And just something quick, commit changes. So this is like a quick and dirty overview of the process. You create a new branch to propose the changes. Can write, but if you are committing a pull request to a project of any sort, please do leave a comment about what you're doing. And you can create the pull request. Always create a branch, always name it explicitly, and always push it back in. But this is just to give you an idea of what the pull request page looks like. So, if I want to add reviewers, you can request up to 15 people to review a single pull request. You just do it on the side here. You can specifically assign it to someone in your organization if you want to. Another great thing is you can take set up specific labels for each pull request. And now if you're working on a project where you have a lot of new people coming in and you have all these you've developed all these issues that are just basic, HTML edits or something small that a new developer might be comfortable with, good first issue tag is invaluable. When you set up those issues, hey, this is your first time here and you want to do something constructive and get a pull request under your belt, this is very simple, very straightforward, edits we need done. The first PR we require of everybody working on one of our projects is to pull down the README, the documentation, follow it to get the repo set up on their own computer so it's functioning correctly. And if they couldn't do that, to figure out why and to make the edit to the setup process, the process documentation, so we can do that. And usually that results in us all working together to figure out what's going on with the system. There's a lot of computer operating system. Well, there's not a lot, but there's enough that make things complicated. There's a lot of different ways to skin these cats, a lot of different frameworks that people work with. Getting them set up on their computer can be difficult. You want to lower those barriers as much as possible when you're developing a community project. So basically using really common frameworks that are the most accessible and easy to use is usually the best way to do it. For that reason, I don't recommend Docker or anything like that because setting up Docker on any computer usually requires you to edit the BIOS to permit to running a virtual machine on your computer. It's a very quick edit, but it's a hurdle that's usually way too far for some people, especially new people coming into a project. So Dockerizing your project is great at the end when you need to push it out and deliver it and have it hosted on Heroku or wherever. But don't ever do that if you're just working on a community project in general. We had a lot of trouble with that very early on because we used a lot. You get into this field and you develop a set of tools that you really like using. Docker. It's a container. It's basically a computer, a virtualized computer on your machine. So you write, a boot sequence for a computer that you'll virtualize. I want this version of, Linux to, boot up with these libraries pre-installed to run this specific styled application in a very bare bones way. It's great if you are hosting, need to send your project to a server to run. And it's good if the person already has Docker installed and configured on their computer, because then they can just take it, okay, this is what the machine is expecting. It's going to run everything. The computer will spin up. It's all containerized in a specific location, and it'll execute every time, hopefully. That's at least the promise. Doesn't usually work. So yeah, that's Docker in a nutshell. So yeah, but if you are working on a project and you have somebody will always come in and ask you if they can Dockerize things. You just tell them at the end, sweet child, that we won't be doing that today. But anyway, a little digression here. Also, you can assign it to, if you are working on a project and you submit a pull request and it's not been set to the project yet, which generally doesn't happen because hopefully you're pulling your issues off the project already. All of that is already integrated into the pull request here on the side. And so you can really hey, this is going to address issue such and such and such and such for this project here. And all of that will kind of click into place as you're moving the project along. So yeah, and GitHub does this wonderful thing where it should be this very friendly green color down here when things are all looking correct, and you can merge the pull request, and you can confirm it if you have the right permissions within the project. And then after you're done, you always delete the branch, and everything is kept clean. But yeah, if you want to delete a file, anything like that, that's all can be handled here. It can be handled anywhere else. All right, so back to that. So these are, this is your standard workflow for working with a project. You make changes, you submit them in a pull request gets reviewed, approved, merged back into the main project, everything moves forward. Now, that's all well and good, but when you've got a ton of people working on something, you kind of need to start organizing it, and that's really where the projects platform comes in. Here's the projects platform, and you can, when you're in Git, you just go create new project, add a new project, and you can start connecting things almost immediately. All right, cool. We can all read this. All right, so here's the projects platform, and you guys might recognize this as the spreadsheet you were all using to manage all your projects beforehand. And you have this great opportunity here to see all the issues associated with the project. If you like a board view, like this is generally how I like to continue to do my projects, because this is the methodology I originally learned for this type of development. Essentially, you can adjust the views to be whatever you want. If you want a Gantt map, you can do that as well. So you just adjust the views up there. You can actually add additional views, like, hey, I want to keep the board and the spreadsheet view. And it's really great. Like, what we like to do is, get our assignees, obviously, for every issue. You can add the issues here if they're in your system. So if I go back to the project, I'll just go here and click on this. All right. So if I've connected this project to that. I've connected this repo to that project. So create an issue. Go to, let's see here. Where was that? Okay, so yeah, projects. When you open up the repo, you can go to projects, and you type in link a project here. And then you just select the project. So every repo will have a project section. You can have multiple projects associated with a repo if you want that kind of insanity in your life, but definitely something you can do. Okay, so back to where I was. If I want to create an issue associated with a repo, you just go create an issue. I want README, and tell them to update the README. Like, this isn't a very good example. I'll show you templates here in a second. So I just want to show you how it connects there. All right, so you've created an issue on your project. Then you go back to the project, and you'll see it actually populates automatically there. So as you are working on projects, and when it's connected, you can actually go ahead, get all the labels sorted out with the issue on the repo side of things, and then you'll see that reflected in the project. Let's see here, make sure it's all signed out. And as a project manager, you'll obviously want to make sure everything is identified correctly. Make sure the interesting thing is, though, when you're collaborating with folks, is once they've signed into the repo and they've connected, they can actually assign themselves to a project, to an issue. So they're like, I'd like to take this over. They go to assignees on the issue, label themselves, and that's really great for the engagement aspect of all this, because they are taking ownership of something, and it's something that they can do to resolve it. All right, so we have updates here. They'll all be reflected here. You can add new fields, with the labels, which is always one we always do. We also like to associate if there's any pull requests linked to it. And if we're doing iterative stuff, what we'll do is an iteration field, which is a custom field you have to do. This is basically your sprints. So every, say, you're working on a project and you want to set 2 weeks aside to we're going to accomplish these 3 features. You can set up your sprint, your iteration, field type. Say it starts like today and it goes every 2 weeks. And the cool thing is, like, it'll do the next 3 iterations for you going forward, so you can kind of start really planning out a good roadmap for what design changes you want to make. And you can always view these in. It'll automatically sort things into Kanban board for you as things are going from to do to in progress. When they're linked to pull requests, they'll move them over to being the progress, and then when they're completed, they've merged over, you'll actually see them in the done file. So it handles all of the things you would have to do back if you're on your Trello board, individually during the meeting. And yeah, so you can actually, plan out the roadmap and all this good stuff. It's a pretty basic tool to get started with, and the great thing is everyone can see it. And you can assign anyone who's associated with the repo to it. It doesn't necessarily need to be related to a pull request. We've kind of discussed really the code-heavy stuff, but this is the great thing about this. You could do anything, any project like this with this platform. It does not necessarily need to be related to a pull request or anything. That is a really nice feature, especially when you're working on code, but you can actually organize any sort of project like this. And as long as everybody is on GitHub, everybody will be able to connect to it. They'll be able to, comment on work. Having it connected to a main place, like a repository where everyone can upload files. We're working on developing other projects that aren't necessarily code related using this platform. So yeah, you get your project set up, you've got your issues laid out. You actually need people to come in and work on this stuff. So we developed this from the Agile framework. We developed this like adaptive, flexible Agile system that's a little bit more open, a little more loosey-goosey, but helps conform to the type of challenges you'll have if you have community working on your projects. So, first thing first, set up your set of meetings, make sure they're on a relatively regular cadence so people have some sort of consistency to their lives, things they can plan on to do or not to do in some cases. We always try to do a weekly meeting for all our projects for, different parts of the project, as well as like big get-together meetings about every 2 weeks. One of the things we did learn is during COVID, you can do these online, works fine. Towards the end of COVID, that we saw our participation rate drop quite a bit because I think everybody, myself included, was getting sick of being online and looking at a camera and looking at a mirror. So be cognizant of that if you're setting up your meetings. Be like, one more meeting I have to sit at my desk and look at the camera for. A lot of people are really itching to get back and have personal experiences with people again. It's been something I think we've all been lacking and frankly are horrible out of practice for, myself included especially. And really you want to lower those social barriers. You want to make sure that, where you're having your meetings, who is meeting, how people can come to them, especially for new people, because this is, especially these days, like going out and meeting people and doing things together is its own challenge. So lower whatever barriers you can, make sure the meeting place is well lit and there's good Wi-Fi, if you can get funding for food. That's always a big incentive to draw people in. Keep things approachable, make sure you have a good code of conduct, and let people know what the expectations of them are while they're there. And just be friendly and welcoming, and you'll have successful meetings. Before the meetings, though, and this kind of is what I do every week, is I'll talk to my project leads. I'll have them make sure all the pull requests that have been submitted, at least up to a day before the meeting, have been reviewed. A lot of times you'll get PRs that come in like 2 minutes before the meeting starts. So folks will, that's just the nature of the beast. So you won't have time to review those before the meeting starts. But you want to make sure you review all the work. And if you have people on your team who are volunteered, to do pull request reviews, you can assign out those as needed. One of our projects that we wrapped up last year is we had 3 people who were just gluttons for punishment, so they got all the PRs to do. And one thing too is you want to look out for if an issue has been opened by somebody who's a contributor and they haven't been around in a while, but it's a feature you want to make sure it gets added. Reaching out to them and seeing if they're still interested in finishing up that issue, and if you don't hear back by the time of the meeting, you pull them off of it and open it back up for other people to take a hold of. Really what you want to prevent is having multiple people working on the same issue for the same thing, because obviously you don't want duplication of effort, but you don't want a conflict of people to contribute something and feel like their work wasn't appreciated because it wasn't the work that was merged in, or they've done all this work and it didn't happen. So really making sure that people take ownership of the issues they want to take ownership, but keeping an eye out for things that have gone stale, and pulling those back in and making sure they do get work done so your project can move forward. You also, if hopefully you're working with a stakeholder, sometimes you're not, but if you are working with a stakeholder, having a meeting beforehand to review all the changes that have been made, so you can iterate hey, we need to pivot here, things need to look a little bit different here, here, and here. Part of this, iterative style design that we do to make sure we get the best product out to the people we're trying to help. Those are really important, and you want to do those kind of off cadence from the other meetings. And then obviously you're a project manager. If you're doing project management, you are planning constantly. So the next steps, based on the meeting with the stakeholder, what issues need to change, what issues need to be done. You can set priorities. You can flag issues in GitHub as, with a label that says this needs to be done now. And that can kind of help people get a fire under it. You can also, when you're actually doing the meetings, you can bring these up and kind of see if someone can take it on. So just that kind of issue maintenance. And then there's the meeting itself. And if you take any notes during this thing, I'm sorry, this is the last slide, but this is the thing I really want to hammer home, because I feel like this is where we have had the most success. And it seems a little intuitive, but it's been a real great process for us when we do projects like this. So first off, welcome everybody to the meeting. Start off with just an overview of what the project is, your 2-minute pitch of what you're trying to do. Talk about the sprint you're on, what you're trying to accomplish during the sprint, how long it's going to go on, that kind of thing. And then go over what's changed over the past week so people can see the progress. And next, and the most important thing that you do if you take anything from this is make sure you do a stand-up where everybody gets to talk about what they're working on. If they've had any blockages, if they need peer help, what we usually would do is if someone's like, hey, I'm working on this issue, but I've got a problem, can we discuss it? And we'll be like, okay, great, we'll come back to this after everybody's had a chance to talk about what they're doing. We'll make a list of the issues we're gonna address in the meeting. And we can circle back and kind of work on it together as a group, which is, really, fosters a good community environment, fosters a good learning environment. You can also assign peer programming for more senior people who are, want to get involved with more, with developing junior developers. So, if you have someone on your team who's really good at the one-on-one, you can definitely assign them over. Be like, hey, so-and-so needs help on this issue. Can you, pull them over and just during this meeting kind of help them through it and kind of make sure that they're on the right track at least, or if we need to bring it back to the group to discuss it a little bit more, that's fine too. And if it's their first time at the meeting, you just have them say a little bit about themselves. Talk, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm here to contribute to this. That doesn't need to be terribly formal. They can share as much as they want, but a good thing to just get them talking to you because this is social stuff. Really, we want people to feel comfortable where they are, but we want people to kind of, tell us about, be part of the group. This is, you're working on something together, you're building something together. And you always have that first issue type, that quick win that they can get. that first issue that they can pull down, look at, and contribute. So they immediately feel like they've connected to the project. They feel a little bit more ownership. It's really helpful to promote a sense of accomplishment, even if it is just updating the README and like working through a problem there. And then, at the end of the meeting, we have people, we'll do a little wrap, 10 minutes at the end, talk about, what they're working on, if there are issues or anything like that. Project managers usually meet with the seniors, either at that point or the day after, and merge things over into the repo. And everyone can pull down the new version, which has all their new work in it. And that's it. And that you just keep doing that, and as it's like that two-step. You maintain the project, plan the next steps, have the meeting, get people to work on it together, and then foster that good connectivity there. I know it seems like super basic, but this is when we started doing this, it really helped get things moving on our projects, rather than just let the cats go where they want. And this isn't the only way to run a project, but I felt like this. We've been successful with this. But yeah. So that's it. Do I have any questions? Yes.